Helmuth Otto Ludwig Weidling was a general in the German army before and during the Second World War. Weidling was the last commander of the Berlin defense area during the Battle of Berlin, and led the defense of the city against Soviet forces, finally surrendering just before the end of the Second World War in Europe. During his military career, he was awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross with oak leaves and swords. Early life. Weidling was born on 2 November 1891 in Halberstadt, province of Saxony. He entered the military in 1911, initially serving in a field artillery regiment in Breslau. His next assignment was to a balloon battalion in the Tegel district of Berlin, and while in Berlin he was promoted to second lieutenant on 10 August 1912. As a lieutenant in the First World War, he served as an Army airship commander, commanding the airships LZ-97 and LZ-113. He ended the war as an officer commanding an artillery battery. He remained in the reduced army of the Weimar Republic after the war, and was promoted on 1 June 1922 to captain in the 4th Artillery Regiment. He was promoted to major on 1 June 1932 and a lieutenant colonel on 1 September 1935. Poland, France and the Soviet Union. In November 1938, Weidling became a colonel of the 56th Artillery Regiment. He fought with this regiment in the Polish campaign of 1939. In April 1940, Weidling was appointed artillery commander of the 40th Panzer Corps, and served in this post during the Battle of France and during the early stages of Operation Barbarossa. On 1 January 1942, still on the Eastern Front, Weidling was appointed to command the 86th Infantry Division. 1 month later, he was promoted to the rank of Major General. On 1 January 1943, Weidling was promoted to the rank of Lieutenant General, 41st Panzer Corps. On 15 October 1943, Weidling became the commanding general of the 41st Panzer Corps. He was given command of the 41st Panzer Corps after the unit took part in the Battle of Kursk from 4 to 20 July 1943. 2 months later, Weidling was promoted to artillery general. Weidling commanded the 41st Panzer Corps until 10 April 1945. There was a short break in his command from 19 June 1944 to 1 July 1944. During this break, Lieutenant General Edmund Hofmeister took over for the first stages of Operation Bagration. Hofmeister was in command when most of General Hans Jordan's German 9th Army, along with the 41st Panzer Corps, was encircled during the Soviet Bobroisk offensive. Weidling regained command before this disastrous operation came to an end, but the 41st Panzer Corps was virtually destroyed. The 41st Panzer Corps was rebuilt as part of the German 4th Army. The 4th Army, under the command of General Friedrich Hossbach, was given the task of holding the borders of East Prussia. On 10 April 1945, 3 days before the Soviets launched the East Prussian offensive, Weidling was relieved of his command and transferred to the Officer Reserve. The Officer Reserve was part of the Army High Command. 2 days after his transfer, he was appointed as commander of the 56th Panzer Corps. The 56th Panzer Corps was part of Gotthard Heinrich's Army Group Vistula. As commander of this corps, Weidling began his involvement with the Battle of Berlin. 56th Panzer Corps. On 16 April 1945, Weidling prepared to take part in the Battle of the Seelow Heights, which was part of the broader Battle of the Odenwälder. Weidling's 56th Panzer Corps was in the center, flanked by the 101st Army Corps to his left and the 11th SS Panzer Corps to his right. All three corps were part of General Theodor Buss's 9th Army, which was defending the heights points above the river Oder. While all three corps were in generally good defensive positions, they were conspicuously short of tanks. Weidling's commander, Heinrich, recognized the shortage earlier in the day, as Hitler had ordered the transfer of 3 panzer divisions from Army Group Vistula to the command of recently promoted Field Marshal Ferdinand Schorner. Colonel Theodor von Doving was Weidling's chief of staff and Colonel Hans Oskar Wöhlermann was his artillery officer during the time that Weidling commanded the 56th Panzer Corps. By the 19th of April, Schorner's Army Group Center was collapsing, and the position of Army Group Vistula was becoming untenable. Heinrich was forced to pull back what was left of his forces, including Weidling's 56th Panzer Corps. The defensive line on the Seelow Heights was the last major defensive line outside of Berlin. With the loss of this position, the road to Berlin lay wide open to the Soviet advance. To escape envelopment and total annihilation, Weidling pulled his corps back with the rest of Army Group Vistula, commander of the Berlin defense area. On the 22nd of April, Hitler ordered that Weidling be executed by firing squad on receiving a report that he had fled in the face of advancing Soviet forces, which was in defiance of standing orders to the contrary. As such, Weidling's actions required a death sentence. Weidling had not fled, and the sentence was called off when he dramatically appeared at the Führer bunker to clear up the misunderstanding. On the 23rd of April, Hitler appointed Weidling as the commander of the Berlin defense area. Weidling replaced Lieutenant General Helmuth Rehmann, Colonel Ernst Käthe, and Hitler himself. Rehmann had held the position only since the 6th of March. Starting the 22nd of April, Käthe had held the position for less than 1 day. For a short period of time, Hitler took personal control of Berlin's defenses with Major General Erich Bauernfänger as his deputy. Weidling was ordered by Hitler to defend the city of Berlin. Specifically, he was ordered not to surrender, but to fight to the last man. The defenders, the forces available to Weidling for the city's defense, included roughly 45,000 soldiers in several severely depleted German Army and Waffen-SS divisions. These depleted divisions were supplemented by the Berlin police force, boys in the Hitler Youth, and about 40,000 elderly men of the Home Guard. The commander of the central government district was SS General Wilhelm Mock. Mock had been appointed to his position by Hitler and had over 2,000 men under his direct command. A core group of his fighting men were the 800 of the Leibstandarte SS Guard Battalion. The Soviets later estimated the number of defenders in Berlin at 180,000, but this was based on the number of German prisoners they captured. The prisoners included many unarmed men in uniform, such as railway officials and members of the Reich Labor Service. Weidling organized the defenses into 8 sectors designated A through 2H. Each sector was commanded by a colonel or general, but most of the colonels and generals had no combat experience. To the west of the city was the 20th Panzer Grenadier Division. To the north was the 9th Fallschirmjäger Division. To the northeast the Panzer Division Müncheberg. To the southeast of the city and to the east of Tempelhof Airport was the SS Nordland Panzer Grenadier Division, composed mainly of foreign, the volunteers. Weidling's reserve, the 18th Panzer Grenadier Division, was in Berlin's central district. On the 25th of April, Weidling ordered Major General of the Reserve Werner Mummit, commander of Müncheberg, to take command of the German 56th Army Corps. Command of Müncheberg was handed over to Colonel Hans Oskar Wöhlermann, the artillery commander from the city. On the 26th of April, Weidling ordered Müncheberg and Nordland to attack towards Tempelhof Airport and Neukölln. At first, with its last 10 tanks, Müncheberg made good progress against a surprised Soviet foe. However, the surprise was replaced with fierce defensive fire and several local counterattacks. These soon halted the German Panzer Division's advance. Bendler Block headquarters. Sometime around the 26th of April, Weidling chose as his base of operations the old army headquarters on the Bendler Strasse, the Bendler Block. Quote, "This location had well-equipped air raid shelters and was close to the Reich Chancellery. In the depths of the Bendler Block, Weidling's staff did not know whether it was day or night." Around noon on the 26th of April, Weidling relieved Wohlermann of command, and Mahmed was reinstated as commander of the Müncheberg Panzer Division. Later that evening, Weidling presented Hitler with a detailed proposal for a breakout from Berlin. When Weidling finished, Hitler shook his head and said, "Your proposal is perfectly all right. But what is the point of it all? I have no intentions of wandering around in the woods. I am staying here and I will fall at the head of my troops. You, for your part, will carry on with your defense, encirclement." By the end of the day on the 27th of April, Weidling and the forces under his command in Berlin found themselves completely cut off from the rest of Germany, as Müncheberg was engaged in desperate fighting in Wilmersdorf. The encirclement of Berlin was completed and the remnants of the city's defenders were trapped. The Soviet Information Bureau announced that Soviet troops of the First Belarusian Front had broken through strong German defenses around Berlin and, approaching from the east and from the south, had linked up in Berlin and northwest of Potsdam. These link-ups cut Berlin off from the outside world. The Soviet Information Bureau went on to announce that troops of the First Belarusian Front took Gartenstadt, Simonstadt and the Görlitzer railway station in eastern Berlin. When Weidling discovered that a major part of the last line of the German defenses in Berlin were manned by Hitler Youth, he ordered German Youth leader Arthur Axmann to disband the Hitler Youth combat formations in the city. But, in the confusion, his order was never carried out. In the end, many German youths did die defending Berlin. Soviet advance. On the 29th of April, the Soviet Information Bureau announced that troops of the First Belarusian Front continued to clear the streets of Berlin, occupied the northwest sector of Charlottenburg as far as Bismarck Street, the west half of Moabit, and the east part of Schöneberg. Russian troops of the First Ukrainian Front occupied Friedenau and Grunewald in northwest Berlin. During the evening of the 29th of April, Weidling's headquarters in the Bendler Block was now within meters of the front line. Weidling discussed with his divisional commanders the possibility of breaking out to the southwest to link up with Walther Wenck's army. Wenck's spearhead had reached the village of Furch on the banks of the Seelow Sea near Potsdam. The breakout was planned to start the next night at 2200. On the 30th of April, the Soviet Information Bureau announced that Soviet troops of the First Belarusian Front had captured Moabit and Halter railway station, Joachimsthal to the north of Berlin, and Neukölln, Marienwerder and Liebenwalde. Troops of the First Ukrainian Front occupied the southern part of Wilmersdorf, Hohenzollern-Damm and Halensee railway station. The Führerbunker. Late in the morning of the 30th of April, with the Soviets less than 500 meters from the bunker, Hitler had a meeting with Weidling, who informed him that the Berlin garrison would probably run out of ammunition that night. Weidling asked Hitler for permission to break out, a request he had made unsuccessfully before. Hitler did not answer it first, and Weidling went back to his headquarters in the Bendler Block, where at about 1300, he received Hitler's permission to try a breakout that night. After Hitler and Braun's suicides, Weidling reached the Führer bunker and was met by Goebbels, Bormann and Krebs. They took him to Hitler's room, where the couple had committed suicide. They told him that their bodies had been burned and buried in a shell crater in the Reich Chancellery garden above. Weidling was forced to swear that he would not repeat this news to anybody. The only person in the outside world who was to be informed was Joseph Stalin. An attempt would be made that night to arrange an armistice, and General Krebs would inform the Soviet commander so that he could inform the Kremlin. A rather dazed Weidling rang Colonel Hans Raffior, his civil chief of staff, in the Bendler Block headquarters soon afterward. Weidling said that he could not tell him what had happened, but he needed various members of his staff to join him immediately, including Colonel Theodor von Dowing, his military chief of staff. The meeting on the 1st of May between Krebs, who had been sent by Goebbels, and Soviet General Vasily Chukov ended with no agreement. According to Hitler's personal secretary Traudl Junger, Krebs returned to the bunker complex looking worn out, exhausted. The surrender of Berlin was thus delayed until Goebbels committed suicide, after which it was left up to Weidling to negotiate with the Soviets. Surrender to Chukov on the 2nd of May. General Weidling had his chief of staff, von Dowing, arrange a meeting with General Chukov. Weidling told the Soviets about the suicides of Hitler and Goebbels, and Chukov demanded complete capitulation. At Chukov and Sokolovsky's direction, Weidling put his surrender order in writing. The document written by Weidling read as follows. On the 30th of April 1945, the Führer committed suicide, and thus abandoned those who had sworn loyalty to him. According to the Führer's order, you German soldiers would have had to go on fighting for Berlin despite the fact that our ammunition has run out and despite the general situation, which makes our further resistance meaningless. I order the immediate cessation of resistance. Every hour you keep on fighting prolongs the suffering of the civilians in Berlin and of our wounded. Together with the Commander-in-Chief of the Soviet forces, I order you to stop fighting immediately. Weidling, General of Artillery, former district commandant in the defense of Berlin. The meeting between Weidling and Chukov ended at 8:23 a.m. on the 2nd of May 1945. Later that same day, loudspeakers announced Weidling's surrender order and copies of it were distributed to the remaining defenders. Aftermath. The Soviet forces took Weidling into custody as a prisoner of war and flew him to the Soviet Union. On the 27th of February 1952, a Soviet military tribunal in Moscow sentenced him to 25 years imprisonment for committing war crimes in Soviet territory during the war. These crimes included his order to the 41st Corps to gather all sick people into typhus camps at Ozarichi in Belarus, where most of them died or were executed. Other episodes included mass executions of Soviet citizens by the German troops under Weidling's responsibility, which he did not deny. Weidling died on the 17th of November 1955 in the custody of the KGB in Vladimir. KGB records listed the cause of death as arterial and cardiac sclerosis along with circulatory collapse. Portrayal in the media. Helmuth Weidling has been portrayed by the following actors in film and television productions. Gert Hansch in the 1971 Soviet film Liberation, The Final Assault. Michael Goodliff in the 1973 British film Hitler, The Last 10 Days. Michael Mendel in the 2004 German film Downfall. This character also appeared in the film A Woman in Berlin, but the role was uncredited. Documentary film Der Todeskampf der Reichshauptstadt. IMDb entry ISBN 3-937163-700. Awards. Wound Badge in Black, German Cross in Gold on the 23rd of June 1942 as General Major and Commander of 86. Infantry Division, Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross with oak leaves and swords. Knight's Cross on 15 January 1943 as General Major and Commander of 86th Infantry Division 408th Oak Leaves on 22 February 1944 as General der Artillerie Commander of XXXXI Panzer Corps 123rd Swords on 21 January 1945 as General der Artillerie and Commander of XXXXI Panzer Corps